Hey folks, how are you? Kurt here with Manana No Mas. And I got home, I took a little bit of a rest. My eyes are still a little bloodshot, I think from getting up. But hey, I just wanted to check in and today was a good day. Today was a good day. The high school, a couple months ago, announced that they were going to do this thing called Salthawk Career Talks. Boom, right here, right? So Salthawk Career Talks. And they asked if I would join, and I of course said yes. I've offered to speak at the school before, and I've spoken before to the automotive classes and stuff like that. You know, I've got a background in automotive and service writing, and I published that book and all those things. So talking in that realm, that made total sense, absolutely right. And then this time was like, hey, you run this agency here in town, and we were wondering if you'd come to talk to the kids on career day about how you got started in what you do as an agency. And the timing couldn't have been better because I've already been in touch with um, a thing that they call Startup Hutch and with the city. And I proposed an apprenticeship program that would encourage these young people to stay in this little small town, take advantage of this high speed internet that's here, and launch their own agencies. And yeah, I have an agency, right? So that sounds crazy, right? Like, so I have an agency and I want to encourage other people to open up agencies. Folks, there is plenty of work to go around, plenty of work to go around. And if I can help this next generation embrace the challenge of self-employment and help them do it where the cost of living's low and the internet is fast, well, then I'm all in. I want to do that. And so the timing's really good. So working with Startup Hutch and the city on this proposal for bringing this, we like kind of like this WordPress agency startup apprenticeship program, like trying to get that launched here in town, and then going and talking to the high schoolers about what it is I do for a living, how I got started, and what that was like. And here's some interesting takeaways. I spoke 3 times today. So 3 times the classroom's full, and I'm speaking 3 times to 3 different groups. The first talk, I'm going to admit, first talk, it wasn't like gangbusters. There was some interest. A couple of kids asked if they could contact me afterwards for more information, and I was like, yeah, absolutely. Here's my website. So that part I think was okay, but it wasn't that Kurt Von Onen signature stamp on a live talk. Let's just put it that way. Like there was just felt like there was something lacking. So then the next session I did, I tried to speed things up a bit to leave more time for Q&A afterwards. And there was a couple of questions, but it wasn't, I don't feel that there was the quality of the talk, boom, that elevated the questions, if that makes sense. I'm trying to give the kids a little bit of grace here. That class was rough. That class was like, I got the impression kids almost didn't want to be there. And then the third session rocked. And but here's how it rocked. I changed the order of the talk. So the first 2 times I was like, my name's Kurt. This is what I do. This is what I've done. This is how I've worked with other things in the past. This could be you. What are your plans? Hey, do you have plans? Like, let's get interactive. And do you have plans? Do you have plans? How about you? You're going to go to school? You're going to start a job? What are you going to do with it? And then finish with, hey, WordPress does 43% of the internet. It's open source, and you can get started for less than $1,000 and start making revenue. Okay, so that was kind of like how I closed the talk. So for the third time, what I did was I said, hey, my name's Kurt. We're just going to have a conversation. I encourage us to be back and forth. I wanted to be kind of casual, but we only got 20 minutes. So let me hit you with the message. If I told you today that for less than $1,000, you could launch your own business and you could make $6,000 before the summer, would you want to know how to do that? And all the hands went up, And then I said, okay, let's dig in. Let's dig in real quick, and let's see if anything I say to you in the next 18 minutes makes any sense. And then we went through it, and I think it went really good. Couple of takeaways. First off, 3 classes out of 3 classes, 4 students knew what WordPress was. That's important. That's really important, because if WordPress runs 43% of the internet and young people don't know what it is, what's its future? So That sounds bleak. It sounds more bleak than I mean it to sound. How can I say this in a better way? I'm a person that likes to see opportunities within the obstacles. So here's what I will say. When I explained what WordPress was, more than 4 people seemed interested in it. How about that? That's better, right? Um, a couple of the kids, I knew that these kids had like some of them have an automotive background, a farming background, being around machinery, things like that. So I said, hey, how many people like racing? How many people are into racing? And that a lot of kids put their hands up. And I said, okay, so what kind of racing are you into? NASCAR, F1. Who's familiar with the Mazda Cup Series? And a couple of hands went up, and I put up the picture on the slide of the Hendricks Motorsports race team. Their cars up on the screen, and I said, "Are you familiar with the name Hendricks?" And they, yeah. I said, "Those are clients of ours. That's who we get to work with." I've worked for Ducati, I've worked for Suzuki, I've worked with Polaris, BRP. I've communicated and interwoven my life into these segments, and people were like, "Oh, that's so cool." And I was like, and I didn't go to college or leverage my financial future to do it. You can get started right away. And so for some people, college is in your future. That's great. If college is for you, that's great. If that's the choice, if that's the plan you made, you want to do a 4-year degree, that's wonderful. Go and chase that. You got a plan, pursue the plan. If you don't have a plan, you need a plan. Like, you can't, if you're not moving forward, you're moving backward. So take a step, do something, get some gumption going. So do you want to get a job? Do you want to go to school, or do you want to create your own job? And wouldn't it be cool if you could do like an apprenticeship program and someone gave you exposure to what it's like to run your own agency, where you're involved in the client meetings and the quoting and the negotiations and the proposal process and the project management and all those things? What if you could go somewhere and get knowledge about all the things it takes to run a business that school didn't give you? Here's another thing that is, I don't want to say bleak, because that's too negative. Out of those 3 classrooms that I spoke to today, how many of them, and you could put a comment in if you're watching this live, how many of them knew what open source was, or have even heard the term open source? Go ahead, I'll wait. I know, I'm waiting for no one. No one's going to put a comment in. None of them. Out of 3 classrooms of students, none of them knew what open source was. So 4 people heard the word WordPress before, and out of those 4 people, none of them knew what open source was. So I explained kind of what open source was, but it wasn't like like for us that are in the WordPress space, that are doing things with WordPress, we think of this like open source. Oh, but it's open source and it's wonderful, and we all get a hold of it, and we can build what we want with it. And these young people, they didn't even know what the term was. So how do you get to your senior year in high school and take classes in computers and IT and coding and all of these things and never hear the word WordPress and never hear the phrase or term open source? That to me was a little bit alarming. And so then I said, okay, so if it's open source, meaning you don't have to pay for the software, what does it take to get started? And I was like, a laptop and an internet connection. So if you already have a laptop and access to the internet, you could start making money this weekend. I mean, you'd have to find a customer, right? But my point was, you can make something happen. You can make something happen. People say to me all the time, oh, wouldn't you rather have a job that's more secure? I'm seeing people with layoff announcements in my LinkedIn feed nonstop. The reason that Mañana No Mas has grown again and is doing what it does is because when I was gainfully employed as a corporate employee at Suzuki, I got laid off. And then I got laid off right at the beginning of COVID. Nobody was hiring people in the middle of COVID. So thank goodness I knew how to fire up my own thing again and go out and generate revenue. You got to, like, life throws curveballs, and you got to be tenacious. You got to find opportunities within the obstacles. I've said that before. And so I instead of being negative, I want to come at this with a piece of hope. My son goes to that school. My son goes to the high school. And so I asked him how his talks went that he went to. And I said, "Well, how did they assign you to the talks?" This is important because I was there today and I wasn't aware of this myself. I said, "How did they assign you to the talks? How did they know what you'd be interested in?" Because here's something cool. A lot of businesses were at the school today. It wasn't like 10 home, like it wasn't like 10 freelancers showed up at the school. No, they had people from all walks of the community come to the school today and pour love and value on top of these students. Like I can't tell you how cool it was to show up and see there had to be 50 other businesses there. Then they gave us donuts and coffee in the morning. We had like a little open networking floor time to meet some other people. And then we did our talks. And then they gave us a lunch afterwards, and you got to meet more people. And like People's Bank was there. Like that People's Bank was there. There was people everywhere. And it was so cool. It was so cool. And I said to my son, out of all those talks, how did they choose which talks to send you to? And my son said, "We picked." I didn't know that. He said, "We picked." So what does that mean? That means that me, Kurt Von Annen, owner of Manana No Mas, that's how I'm listed in this talk, right? I own my own WordPress agency. I own my own internet agency. These kids chose my talk. I didn't know that. So I told you earlier in this presentation, I said, I get to a slide where I show them I work with WordPress, and I kind of save it to the end, right? So I go through like I work with this race team, Ducati, Suzuki. I throw these big names out. This is what I've done. This is what I could do. These are the books that I've published. This is this. This is that. But at the end of the day, I have a job to do every day, and this is what I do. I run this agency, and my agency is based on working with WordPress. And WordPress runs 43% of the internet. It's open source, and you too could get started for less than $1,000. None of them, four of them, okay, four of them heard the word WordPress before. None of them knew what open source was. And a lot of them didn't have a clue about money. I mean, no clue at all about money. No clue at all. I said earlier in the talk, I asked kids, "Do you have a plan? Do you have a plan? What's your plan?" One girl said she's going to go to school for automotive. I said, "What about automotive?" She goes, "Well, for automotive." Okay, great. What are you going to study about automotive? She didn't really have an answer. I said, "So you're going to go to automotive, like automotive technician training?" And her eyes lit up. And I said, "Okay, great. So no matter how much schooling you go to, when you get out and into the real world and you get a job at a dealership, you're going to be an entry level tech. So you're going to be a lube tech. So, you're going to change oil, tire rotations, maybe a couple brake inspections, things like that. Or 6 months or a year go in, maybe you're going to start to do some alignments and some front end work, maybe some struts and shocks. You're going to do some brake replacement, turning the rotors, replacing the rotors, things like that. And you're going to grow in this thing. Soon you'll be doing drivability and diagnostics and transmission work." As that sounds good. She goes, "Yeah." I go, "Okay, great. Here's what I want everyone else in the room to hear. Anything that you learn, anything that you have exposure to, you save that. You save that experience so that it becomes part of your expertise. And as you get older, that expertise adds up and you put yourself in a position to add value to other people." And, I talked to him about the book I wrote, Action Leadership from the Edge. And then so we were talking about this. And I said, "So what happens if you hurt your back? What happens if you get injured on the job? What happens if, and you can't turn wrenches anymore? If you've gained this expertise and you can still communicate well, now you can become a service writer." Who in here knows how much a service writer makes? Nobody knew how much a service writer made. I said, "And if you don't like that, you could be a warranty clerk. How much?" And this is what a warranty clerk does. "What do you think a warranty clerk does?" And then we talked about what a warranty clerk does. And I said, "How much money do you think a warranty clerk makes?" And nobody knew how much a warranty clerk made. Then a young man in the room said, "I am going to own a car dealership." I said, "Dude, that is a huge aspiration. Congratulations for you. That is a big plan. That's your plan? That's a big plan." I said, "How much money do you think it takes to build and operate an automobile dealership?" He told me $100,000. It's like that scene in Rain Man where Raymond thinks a Snickers bar is $200,000 or something like that. Of course, in the other direction. So I was like, well, $100,000 probably wouldn't really work as the down payment. I said, if you want to build a dealership, you're looking like between $5 and $8 million in capitalization to get the building done. And you got to put some equipment in that building. And then you've got to floor plan, which means finance the inventory to sell. So if you're selling for Ford or Chevy or Dodge or Mercedes or Porsche or whatever, you sign a deal with like Wells Fargo or somebody that you're going to floor plan that inventory, which means you need to show, at least on paper, that you're liquid for about $10 million. And I was like, do you have $10 million? And he, no, I don't have $10 million. And I was like, okay, do you have friends and family that could amass $10 million for you? And he was like, well, no. And I said, well, then maybe you want to start in the quick lube bay and work your way up. And I wasn't trying to be mean. It wasn't about being mean. I didn't make it funny either. I was just like, let's talk about money. Let's talk about finances. How much do you think this job pays? They don't know how much these jobs pay. Do you think that's good money? Some people said yes. Some people said no. I told them a story about someone I know that got a job here in Wichita. They're making $60,000 a year. I said, is $60,000 a year good money? And they went like this. $60,000 a year in Wichita, where the cost of living is not high, right? And the average salary in America is something like $45,000 a year. So is $60,000 for a 20-year-old in Wichita good money? Yes, it's great money. And so those were some of the things that came out of the talk today. I feel cautiously optimistic because they were hungry for the knowledge. Some kids didn't care. Some kids looked at their phones. But for the most part, the kids that came to my classes today, they were hungry for what the real world has to offer. They wanted to hear from boots on the ground what it's like to be out of school and making things happen. It's one thing to be in school and hear your teachers ramble on at you all day. It's another thing when someone shows up at your school and says, hey, this is what I do for a living and how I make a living for my family. And so that part went really, really, really well. On the WordPress front, with all the politics going on in WordPress over the last year and with just some of the weirdness that's been going on with different things, I am hesitant to be like, oh, this is it's Shangri-La. No, there's some challenges. But here's the other side of the reality. The other side of the reality is that when I say there's challenges, I'm looking at it through a lens of somebody that's maybe out of the 50 or 70 or 100 people that I know that are active and vocal inside the WordPress community, like where something happens in WordPress and this group cares about it. Like that's kind of like where my head's at. But then you have to realize there's a whole community of people, thousands and thousands of people that don't care a lick about any of that stuff. And so it is, I think it's too big to fail. 43% of the internet, lots of established plugins, lots of established tools, hosting's affordable. I think that we are in a good space. That's that. Have a good day.